Why would you do that? I said 3, 2, 1, and then I paused to hit record, and then you're like, I thought you were saying myself.
And look at me, I'm centered.
It's because, and we're all assholes. What do you want?
God dang it. Hi, welcome to Quantum Beer Break. I'm James. I am drinking rum and coke. I have my Stein.
Sense of consistency.
Yeah. I'm Jacob. This week I have a special treat for me. I took a visit to our local liquor store and picked up a bottle of Reservoir, a Virginia bourbon whiskey. It is 50% alcohol, 100 proof, and very good. Very good.
You have Warlock. Why are you not drinking that?
Because I left it at your house.
Oh, you did?
Because whiskey is better.
I'll be right back.
Don't you do it, James.
It's
You will regret
Warlock.
decisions later.
It's Warlock.
You will regret decisions. Take it from the master.
I'm drinking my whiskey today just on the rocks. Since it's a bourbon whiskey, you don't want to really mix it with anything. It's got a really good smoky on it, really good caramel, sort of smoothness over the tongue that kind of lingers for a little bit. It's not really very burny for how high proof and alcohol content it is.
Look at you being all like proper.
Granted,
and stuff.
that was my opinion. Owen tried it last night and was coughing for like a solid 15 seconds. So opinions vary on how burny a given alcohol is.
This is after practiced.
This was after drinking soju for a bit, so there's a kind of a big difference. That's.
Oh, we'll get back to the soju. Hey Matt, what are you drinking?
I am drinking Basil Hayden's Dark Rye. I decided to pick it up because I do appreciate their rye. It is definitely a full-bodied whiskey. I would appreciate if the sweetness of the rye came through a little more on its finishing notes, but I definitely get the port flavor that it does claim to have on the finish. It is definitely got a heavy mouthful to it.
What's a heavy mouthful?
So like, did you ever like put like heavy cream in your mouth, and if your mouth just feels, you got that feeling of like heavy and fullness in there?
Like your mouth gets coated, and it's hard to taste anything else for a bit.
Or like skim milk, you drink it, it's kind of like water.
Yes.
James, do you like gladiator movies?
That's exactly. I was like in my brain. I'm just like, don't make comments. You ever see a grown man naked?
You ever just gargle heavy cream?
All right, that is a heavy mouthfeel, sir.
Got it. So it's a syrupy flavor.
Mouthful.
Got it. Okay.
And if you answered yes to any of these questions, leave in the comments for this video your favorite airplane quote.
Oh, please. It's a horrible week for me to stop sniffing glue. Let's talk really quick about. I think was it soju? Is soju right?
Soju is a Korean rice liquor. In my brain, I associate it as similar to sake. In terms of it's a clear liquid that's very alcoholic.
Yes.
But soju is relatively cheap in the States. You can get a bottle for like $5. And it tends to be very fruit forward, like peach or grapefruit.
Bottle, not bottle.
Oh. True. They're small bottles, and you drink it out of shot glasses. You don't pour yourself like 2 thumbs of soju. Generally, it's very, very smooth, light on the alcohol taste, and it's very sweet. So it's a very sweet liquor.
So if you followed any of our podcasts in the previous years, especially towards the beginning, the silent partner doesn't drink a lot of alcohols. We've actually joked about it, her drinking something and then making the typical silent partner face, which is and any type of alcohol. So they poured me a shot glass of soju. I handed it to me. Tasted. I was like, "Oh, you might like this," and passed it off to the silent partner. The silent partner flipped up her mask, took a sip, went, flipped up the mask, took more.
Say, we're already in uncharted territory.
And we were like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, second drink." And then she was just like, as she like turned away from me, so I couldn't take it. I'm just like, "Oh, apparently I've lost my drink."
We actually had to pour him another shot. It was incredible.
Yes, silent partner actually found an alcohol she likes.
So,
hooray!
Again, it's a cheap investment to try it. You see if it's for you.
Yeah.
And so, in the far distant future of the Aetherium,
So,
soju is the
why-
only balm that makes things better.
Why are we
in
talking
meat
about
space.
like alcohol in the real world? Oh, because today we're talking about
Meatspace.
Meatspace.
I feel like I made the segue, and then you guys got on the next train, and were like a full car behind me.
Yeah,
That's normally how I live my life, sir.
our
I don't
car
understand what the
didn't
problem
have
is.
the zombies on it. Your car did.
I don't know what
Means
that
my
means in
car
this
survived.
context.
I watched Train from the Japanese where there's zombies on a train.
Oh, Train from O? Yeah, no, I've heard that movie.
That it's really good. It's actually really really good. Okay, so Meatspace. This is an optional. This is actually the last episode of the character creation portion of the Ethereum role playing game segment that we are doing. It's an optional section that deals with your actual physical body as opposed to the Ethereum stuff. As a given to that, you don't have things like glitch, overclock, anything that involves the Ethereum dice. Actually, there's no Ethereum dice at all involving with Meatspace because it's literally just humans.
So is that where I
It's
rip out my D20s, D4s, and D6s then?
You still use
No?
D10s for normal tests, but the stats work a little bit differently. Not a lot differently. If you're familiar with the main game's rules, then you should be able to quickly jump into playing out as your character in the real world.
So if you can't
Uh,
do any of the cool stuff like hacking the universe, why would you do any of this, Jake?
I have a simple counter argument for you, sir. Let me make sure I have the correct thing in the book so I can accentuate this very carefully. Ah, yes, the parlor grenade,
The
where
parlor grenade.
you can get a small bowl of grenades for your parlor, where you essentially they are infinite in number for a relatively low cost. You just have to go home and pick up a few grenades.
You can do that in the Ethereum. You can have a shotgun that fires fireballs.
I know, we discussed this on the what episode I was on. I asked for one.
hmm It even says in the description they have small dainty grenades that have become common on the streets.
There.
It's
It's so there's actually something in Meatspace called the parlor
they're cherry
grenades.
bombs.
They're cherry bombs.
Oh, you mean the things my neighbors light off on a nightly basis at 1 in the morning?
Except they
If you
explode bigger and they cause more damage.
I don't know. I really thought my house exploded the other night.
That's a
So
fair question.
you have a couple of things in Meatspace that will affect your character in the Ethereum.
Yeah, so
Um,
the first thing to know is if you choose to play with the meat space rules, then the biggest impact you're going to have on your ethereal character, who you'll be spending most of the game playing as, is your health and sync values are likely going to change.
yes.
By default, it's 7 sync and 5 health for everybody. But if you play with meat space rules, the way you take care of yourself in the real world will influence how healthy you are in the Ethereum. So put a pin on that 7 sync and 5 health numbers
Mhm.
if you're going to play with meat space rules. Likely going to change, and you'll recalculate those numbers based on your other choices.
So being
Actually,
a fat, unhealthy nerd in Meatspace is bad for you on the internet?
Maybe,
yes.
maybe not. We'll
Actually,
come to that.
yeah. Well, no. Yes. Your answer is correct. Because your
Actually,
sync,
if your goal is to have high sync and low, and you're don't not worried about health, being an intelligent,
Mhm.
mentally active, social nerd is a lot more beneficial than working out.
And things like it will change. So your health and sync will change depending on what's going on in your real life. So the first thing you have to do is in your Ethereum role-playing book that I have here, you have to choose what your background is. This is actually
Weak.
current. I want to have my physical book, and my physical book is currently with Josh. So
Weak.
you have to pick like a background, like where you came from, what you're doing, and it includes things like you were child labor, you're government educated,
Like
hey,
how we went there
you're part
first.
of high society. Jake,
Yeah.
what do these backgrounds give you?
Nothing. They're just story fluff. No, I'm lying.
Actually, kind of
So
this.
there are No, not at all. So in your ethereal character, there are 7 core stats that you use to make tests with. Stuff like strength, intellect, coordination, speed, things like that. For your real world Meatspace character, there are not necessarily stats representing physical aspects of your character. They are called training. There are 10 different training values, essentially 10 stats, and what tests and checks you make in the real world are based on those stats. To run down the list real quick, we've got athletics, which covers things like your physical conditioning, close quarters combat, do you know how to use knife? Diplomacy, engineering, firearms, medicine, savvy, software, spycraft, and survival. Uh, Whenever you need to make a test in the real world setting, it's going to fall under one of those skills. And just like with your ethereal character, you will grab a number of d10 equal to the number in that skill, and you'll roll them against a target number, looking for a default of 7 or higher for success, and with exploding dice. What will never happen is glitch, because there's no ethereal element to add glitch. There's no way to harness chaos or inherently bad connections in the real world, so you'll have a fairly straight up and down roll. The rules we've talked about for things such as stunts or boosts will still apply. So if you're rolling with an ordinary firearm and you get a lot of successes, you can turn those successes into extra damage per the normal skill test rules. Your background that you choose.
Oh, somebody else joined us. Oh, I'll enjoy
Oh,
this.
hello.
Hi, Owen. We're currently recording and talking about Meatspace and Ethereum.
Welcome to the live recording.
Yeah.
So the background that you choose will give you a bonus to some of these attributes, some of these trainings. For example, if you were an ethereal tester, in which case you are an exception to the norm, having had surgery at a young age to get into the Ethereum early and to help assist with testing new rig technology, then you would start the game with 2 ranks of engineering, 1 rank in medicine, 1 rank in savvy, and 4 ranks in software. So that basically gives you an initial training loadout. In addition, once you've chosen your background, you get 10 additional points to distribute freely, however you want. And then the only rule being you can only increase a given training twice. You can't increase it more than twice.
And as the statement says, you can actually have trainings of 0 and stuff, which just means you're completely and totally untrained to that. Doesn't mean you can't roll dice, just means you're untrained.
Actually, that is
It means
explicitly what
it
having
says,
a
so it says
0
yes.
means.
You can have some modifications that actually make you roll dice on a training 0. Sorry.
Yes. So if you have 0 training in firearms and you pick up an assault rifle, then no, you're not going to do anything effective with it. However, if you have training in CQC and you pick up an assault rifle, you can use it to club somebody.
Yeah.
Got to think outside the box.
It's
So-
good.
Tomahawk, throw that assault rifle.
So Meatspace is very much the use of your English language like Ethereum is. Ethereum space.
A little bit, yes. Also, this doesn't really translate well into the actual Ethereum. So, like, if you have a super high firearms in Meatspace, it doesn't really mean you're really good at shooting guns in Ethereum.
Yes, that is actually really important. None of these trainings translate to ethereal dice. There's no way to get bonuses for using guns in the Ethereum by knowing how to use guns. What I kind of like to view that as is it lets you make interesting character decisions where your real life training experience is not necessarily how you might picture yourself. Someone who, for example, is like a very like former combat soldier, maybe they play a support role in the Ethereum. Maybe they're a medic. And that's the sort of programs and the training and sort of the ethereal form that their character takes. So that gives you opportunities to sort of diversify and maybe or you just have your character be relatively similar, because that also makes sense given that people tend to view themselves as they are and not necessarily as a completely different person. Maybe our fireball throwing wizard in the Ethereum is actually a nerdy computer programmer.
Mm-hmm. All right, so basically that's just
So-
you just pick it and you get some training points. You take your 10 points that you have left over and just add them. I think you can't have, if I remember correctly, you cannot. No value can be increased more than twice.
Right. So, say for example, for our rig tester example we gave earlier, who starts with a software of 4, if he wanted to, he could spend 2 of his free skip trainings to increase that to 6, but he can't increase it any higher.
Correct.
Now, all of this is something you're going to want to discuss with your DM and the other players to determine, okay, how much meat space are we actually going to play? And that might influence kind of what you need or what you want to do. Also, just kind of figure out what kind of games are we expecting to do. And I would treat this like you would create any kind of character, kind of discuss, okay, what would make sense? And also, is there gaps we need to fill in the party? Do I want to change up how I play my character so we're kind of balanced? Or we just, everyone wants to be able to shoot guns in real life, so we all put a bunch of points in guns?
Right.
I don't know. Do you?
Hey, guns.
Okay. After you decide on training, each of your characters is in fact, going to have a job, and you choose what you're going to do for work. The job you have sort of informs a lot of the rest of character creation.
Yep.
However, in the Aetherium system, they actually highly recommend that unless it's directly relevant to an adventure, for the love of God, don't role play work.
Please don't roll play work.
Do it outside of sessions. Just assume your character is going to a job.
You should actually go to your job and pretend in your game that you don't have to actually work.
Now, why would we even put work like this into a game? Well, it's one way to represent.
No, I know.
Money.
I know.
It's
No,
one way to represent money, which
No.
is accurate.
kind of yes, but no. It represents like things you get to assist you. So like my character is a farmer.
Like money.
A lot of things don't have money, but some of the things don't actually involve money. They involve stipends. So like
Which is another form of currency, aka money.
I hate you. So
James, it gives you points to spend later on.
It
in
gives
this
you points to
process.
spend
It's
later on.
money.
So like
Gotta
my-
get that bread.
my character is a farmer. So he actually has in the role playing book, he has a stipend of 2 that can be used for food basics. So he just gets 2 free stipend that he can use towards food.
Almost like it's money.
I hate you on so many different levels.
So when you pick a job, we've mentioned the term stipend. Every job comes with stipend, which is essentially a budget that you can spend on basics, which we'll talk about in a bit. Each job also comes with an additional ability. Now this could be flavorful, where you get something interesting, or it could be mechanical. Generally, each job's going to have some kind of mechanical benefit. Like James mentioned, you could be a farmer, and you get an extra 2 stipend to spend only on food basics, which could free up your budget to use elsewhere. A merchant, for example, whenever he increases his VAR, his sort of in the Ethereum wealth equivalent, as long as that is higher than his stipend, he gets 2 real world wealth. He automatically converts his reputation in the Ethereum into business opportunities in the real world and generates actual wealth.
Kind of like he records a series on YouTube and posts it for money.
Incredible.
But there's also you can also remember how we said that unless you're doing back in the beginning of the character creation, we said unless you're really doing something that involves heavily on like being part of a faction, like you're a bunch of Akaru agents that you should all just be unaligned kind of deal, like you're not really part of a faction. In this, you can still be working for, say, House Akaru. Like your actual Meatspace job is working for House Akaru, like being a spy or a corporate spy or something like that. But in the Ethereum, you're just a guy. You don't actually have to be associated with the two.
And it's also worth noting that some jobs actually take place in the Ethereum.
Mhm.
So you might do some of your job time is in the Ethereum generating value for whoever you work for, as opposed to I'm logged out at my 9 to 5 job. That is not necessarily the case. Think of it like Ready Player One, where people log in to do work and they're doing their jobs in the virtual reality.
Yep.
Like James said, there is some unaligned jobs that are just kind of free range. And then there are jobs specifically affiliated with some of the corporations and the other various collectives. And you could go ahead and flip through the book if you want. Like you could be an explorer with Rezex, you could be a House Akaru eventer. And generally, for having a collective job, this is going to carry a little more story weight. So I encourage DMs to think of how does working for a collective and players, DMs and players, how does working for a collective necessarily either conflict or enhance what the group is doing for this adventure? Like if they're planning a heist with House Akaru, Is there some kind of connection an actual employee of House Hikaru could use in the material space? And or even better, is there a consequence? Don't necessarily go over ham. Work is meant to sort of add additional flavor and role playing opportunity to the game. It is not. I wouldn't use it as a cudgel to punish players for decisions that characters make unless it works with the story.
So one of the things you could actually do is if your characters are up for it, you could do something like, no, they work for House of Karu. Like uh, my character actually works on a subsidiary of House of Karu, um, farming kelp out in the sea. If I is my Aetherium character, say we were doing a run or we are doing some type of event or something that was against House of Karu, that
Well, do they find
brings
out about it?
yeah, that brings up a very hard question answer thing here where it's just like I'm hurting them, but at the same time I'm hurting myself.
Uh, True, but they also have a little bit of padding in the system where these collectives are so large
Yeah,
that you could absolutely be working against in one area and no one will notice or even care depending on the impact.
but it could come down
Right.
to say like Fifth Element, where he's like oh yeah, I had this wreck and all this stuff has happened. Oh, by the way, you're laid off. Like it could
Womp
just
womp.
yeah, you're just now you're homeless.
So we'll come back into some of that with how characters change between sessions when we sort of wrap up the Meatspace section, but just be aware of it for right now. We've mentioned that characters get stipends. So when we go to the next section, basics, this is where probably you start making actual really substantive decisions. Like choosing where your stats are is one thing, but basics is where you make some really big decisions. So there are 4 different categories: food,
Yep.
shelter, education, and socialization. And each of these influence how you're and represent how you're taking care of yourself in the real world, sort of between sessions.
And these things change.
They can absolutely change. The recommended pace of change is you cover about a week at a time when choosing your basics, and you will allocate your stipend as a budget, and you'll essentially choose, okay, I'm going to put 2 stipend into food, I'm going to put 2 into shelter, and I'm going to put 1 into education and socialization because I'm more concerned about staying physically alive this week.
Yep.
So we mentioned weeks. Time is a little funny. We haven't really talked about this, but since we're talking about Meatspace, time is absolutely relevant because, per the setting, the Aetherium space moves at a different time scale.
It's 4 days for every real day.
No, in the book is actually a 12-to-1 ratio. 1 week of material time is roughly 3 months in the Aetherium.
Yes.
And if you're really going down to like the second scale, the book recommends using 12-to-1. So every minute in the real world is 12 minutes in the Aetherium. Now, this has big storytelling aspects where there are characters who are 60 years old in the real world, but because of how much time they spend logged into the Aetherium, especially if they have the wealth to do so, they could in fact be mentally a couple hundred years old. And so this is sort of where you get, especially as you get more and more ancient, you could be interacting with an NPC with hundreds of years. Like we're talking like Elder Dragons level of fantasy nonsense in terms of power, knowledge, intellect, and things like that, while still everyone being physically human. In addition, this does has complications and sort of consequences where if your character logs out and it takes them a few minutes to collect themselves, then the fight's over, or the party has moved on, or you log back in and you have to catch up with everyone because while you took 5 minutes to catch your breath before logging back in, that's now been a full hour inside the Aetherium. So the situation may have changed.
Yeah, it's like when somebody on a raid yells, "Hold on, bio break," and they leave. Um, they take 12 minutes to log out, and they take 12 minutes to log back in. That's almost a half an hour already. So
Mhm.
for them, it's only been like 2 minutes. But for you, it's been like a half an hour. So things like extra, like that's why like sync damage and being forcibly logged out is bad because you're in the middle of a fight, you get forcibly logged out, other than the other side effects of this, you're at least going to take another minute to log back in. If you immediately jump back in, that's 12 minutes of fighting that's going on where you're out.
So I think part of the effect that this has in the game, from like a mechanical standpoint, character death is actually relatively hard to do. It is possible, especially if you're playing with Meatspace rules, where things like, I don't know, corporate raid teams are attacking your character's actual body if you piss off someone enough. But actually in the Ethereum, hitting 0 HP does not have, it can mess you up on the short term, but on the long term scale, you're unlikely to actually die. So
once again, we cannot wait for Flatliners. Not Flatliners name, but yeah.
Death and Resurrection in the game is relatively cheap compared to something like D&D 5th edition, which 5th edition D&D is actually already kind of cheap compared to older editions as it is once you get higher level. So if you're getting knocked out in one fight, it's cool. We'll take the mandatory time. Whoever's left will wrap up the fight or run, and then you'll be back in the next scene. In general, when the game is divided to scenes, you cannot log out and log back in the same scene, but you'll be back with full health in the following scene.
Yes.
Sorry, full sync, maybe a little roughed up on health. Your physical health is what's kind of tracking your endurance. If you get logged out a whole bunch in a row and things are going poorly, your physical health is going to be what determines your actual suitability and what might actually get you killed.
So speaking of a corporate raid, let's say you're in a corporate, you're sitting at home in Meatspace, logged into Ethereum, and a corporate raid happens, and you take a gunshot to the back of the head.
You're probably dead.
Let's not call them raids. Let's just call them Axiom SWAT teams.
That doesn't make me feel better.
So the Axiom FBI knocks cordially at my door and waves hello with a bullet, and it just happens to grace the back of my head and my forehead all at the same time.
We will talk about that in great detail next Adepticon.
Oh, really?
So we've already talked about this in a Quantum Rearrect before. There is a faction which is not called Flatliners anymore. It's called something else.
Well, I remember you mentioning this before, but I thought it was just an idea that disappeared.
There's no official rules for what happens here. There may be additional content in the future for covering that use case. You're probably just dead, because even that faction is relatively rare.
Yes, most of the time it's
you're just dead. I'm sorry.
The connection is gone. But the thing is, remember, there's a 12-minute difference. So you could be shot, and it's still taking the signal from your body to your Ethereum self 12 minutes to go. By the way, you're dead.
As a quick side note, I would not pull this trick, because
don't pull this trick.
As a DM, for my players' enjoyment, don't just announce that, oh, by the way, this person suddenly disappears, without giving at least some indication, because characters are canonically completely unaware of the real world around them.
Yep.
So by literally just being, oh yeah, there's a corporate raid in your apartment, that is absolutely rocks fall, everyone dies level DMing, and no one enjoys that.
But
so if you're gonna do a corporate raid, make sure your players know that it's going to be a thing, and let that flesh out your story. It should be rare. Corporations and collectives usually do not care enough to spend the resources to go that direct.
Yeah, it's usually you have done something horribly, horribly bad, or you have discovered something horribly, horribly bad that they're going to do this.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you end story arcs with.
Yeah, or begin them.
I just know the players I'd probably be playing this game with, and we would most likely find ourselves in said situations because we're jerks.
Yeah.
So
that's a season finale kind of thing.
You are already at that point. If you've gotten to the point where you've said you've pissed off a Karu, they're gonna send one of their higher ups in the Ethereum to just show up and just be like, "Hi," just smack you across the face and just stop messing with us.
Yeah.
Where you wake up, you take off your rig, you're like, oh, that was a hard set, and you look down and there's a note in Japanese on your chest that just says, "Stop it."
Which is a real shame, because my character doesn't read Japanese. Okay.
You learn.
Well, I think at that point, if I just log out of Ethereum and there's a note in my lap, I pretty much got the context of said note. without knowing the language it's written in.
Your whole room has just been rearranged.
Oh,
Dang, Akaru.
Aunt Ino sent me a card. Wonderful. I'll have to thank her. Never underestimate my ability to be oblivious. Okay, so how does basics actually work? We're a little far afield to discuss some of the sort of lore and setting implications. So basics are essentially you can spend 0, which is usually really bad.
It's very bad,
And
actually.
the effect of basics, sorry, let me walk back. The effect of basics is the more you spend, the larger the bonus is to your health and sync. Generally, food and shelter will improve your health, which means that you can take the effects of a bag logout more often. You're a little sturdier to Meatspace damage. Like if you want to be doing a lot of stuff in the Meatspace or you're doing dangerous things in the real world, food and shelter are going to be really important to keep your health up. It also is important to you experiment with glitch a lot. You're going to want to have a buffer. You want to make sure you're physically healthy and you can take the kind of mental damage that might be a hazard to your profession.
So
Education and socialization will, on the other contrast, sort of improve your sync. Like, do you want to have a really big health pool in the Aetherium and just not be forced to log out? Then increase your mental strength by getting a good education, understanding sort of how this works, and keeping sort of psychologically healthy with socialization is kind of how that works. Now you can choose to spend stipend on your basics, and spending 0 or 1 will typically come with a small modifier to the stat and effects, as well as negatives to a few of your training skills. For example, food tends to influence your athletics, close quarters combat, firearms, and survival skills in the real world. Again, makes sense.
also
You're
your
not
health.
Yep. So, just as an example, say that you go for you spend 2 stipend on nutritional food paste for food for the week. That is
Soylent Green.
Soylent Green.
Mm-hmm.
That is the neutral. You're going to have +3 health for your stat block, and your training won't be affected. You could spend more than that. By the way, the next level above food paste is fast food. You can spend more than that to increase your health even more and start getting stat bonuses for your real world character. Spend less than that, and you'll start getting negatives and a lower bonus to your health pool. And
So
all of the basics essentially work like this, where they modify the numbers in some of your skills.
So we won't go through all of them, but remember, my farmer character, he only has a stipend of 4, with 2 stipend extra going to food. So automatically, I can just be like, I'm a farmer. I automatically have food paste. I have the baseline, but I only have 4 in 3 other categories. So if you look, three doesn't go well into 4. I can do one,
Yeah, it does.
and
One
one,
of
Got
each,
and
one
then
of
3,
one
4,
extra.
and you put it in the gap, and you have a solid wall.
Yeah. Except for like, I'm having a bunch of ones. So one could be one of my extras. So like my food's taken care of. I've got just food paste. I'm baseline existing. Um, I'm a little better than existing. Substance is a little bit lower than that. Like I'm eating trash, but I'm eating pretty good for most people in the world. Do I want to put 2 in my shelter? Because it helps me modify my health. Like if I'm actually like a 2 in shelter is a rundown shack. A 1 in shelter is I live in like a little tiny box apartment, a coffin apartment. Um, but it's like okay, well, yeah, I can live in a coffin apartment. That's not a problem. But what about my education? 1 is I just read. I'm just keeping up with the news. 2 is I'm actually getting educational VR. But like I'm a farmer, I don't need educational VR. I'll just read the news. That's fine. Whatever.
I think
You're a
what you're getting
farmer,
at,
don't cows
James,
count?
is the basics are always a balance of scarcity.
Yes.
Even if you're like at a premium job, like a House of Cargo Inventor, your stipend is 6. You do not have enough to put 2 into everything. So you're constantly having to balance where do you want your boosts? What are you okay with taking some negatives to?
You're
And that's
always poor in one area.
so that is sort of basic stipends. There's a way to get more to allocate. We'll cover that with our last section for
All right, so let's talk about luxuries.
So luxuries are an additional final step where you can essentially spend resources that you generate during character creation for tangible things. So this is the buying equipment step. Luxuries have a pretty wild range of what can be considered a luxury and what you can spend on. The first thing you do is everyone gets 10 wealth. Wealth is actual hard currency in the real world. It's not reputation based the way that VAR is in the Ethereum. It is actual money. Like, do you have some gemstones? Do you have money in a bank account? Do you have inherited funds? All of which is represented by wealth.
Cash
In
underneath the
addition,
mattress.
in addition to just having 10 wealth to start, you also roll 10 dice. Every success will generate you 2 additional wealth, and the dice do explode. This entire system is wild to me. I do not understand why this just randomly generate your wealth. So you could have this buildup of a character who is, relatively well educated, has a posh job, and they rolled very poorly on their wealth. Whereas you have a farmer
That's because
who
they
rolled incredibly well on their wealth. It's very random, and the book's explanation is
Life's unfair.
life,
Yeah.
deal with it. That's literally the book's explanation.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah, that really
that's fun.
posh person gave their money to Bernie Madoff.
Or
and
you-
they don't have any wealth.
or it was just a
The
bad month for
farmer-
you, and
Granted,
farmer found the hidden stash of shit when he was plowing the fields.
yeah.
granted, I'm
Like just
also
being.
I'm also in an RPG where you randomly generate your social class and your starting wealth is based on that. So whatever.
Oh, that's kind of
Um,
like you.
So, what can you buy?
once you have your wealth, you can buy all kinds of stuff. You can buy weapons. You
cherry
can buy
bombs?
armor. You can buy cherry bombs.
You can buy cherry bombs.
There's an entire chapter of the book covering luxuries that we're not going to get into here, but equipment, also things like services and privileges. You can probably one of the single biggest expenditures that I think James is trying to drive me towards
Mhm.
is your rig. So if you're not playing the Meatspace rules, everyone is assumed to have a basic connection to the Ethereum. You have a rig, and you have some kind of gear that just everyone has the same thing. Keep it neutral, keep it moving. Probably the single biggest benefit of playing with the Meatspace rules, because basics, if anything, is a nerf to Ethereum characters. Having to manage your basics, if you're extremely wealthy, you can give yourself several buffs of your choice. Otherwise, it is a management game of scarcity. Wealth lets you buy better rigs with bonuses that directly impact your ethereal character. For example, you can buy a rig, you can buy mods for it that just straight up increase your iconology stat, letting you have a more complicated iconic program than you would be able to get than during normal character creation. You can have all kinds of other bonuses, like in addition to your iconic program, you can store a certain level of complexity of pylon programs in your own rig instead of on the pylon, meaning that you can guarantee that they'll spawn in with you wherever you go. You can also buy motorcycles. I think buying a motorcycle is actually a really cool detail. I encourage everyone to spend wealth on buying a motorcycle.
Flying cars.
So there is, again, an entire an entire section of the book is dedicated to luxuries and buying rigs. And this is a much more traditional RPG experience of buying stat bonuses with resources generated during character creation. So I'll let you guys discover that on your own. Again, rig is probably one of the single biggest things you can invest money in, and goodness gracious, there is a big money sink for it.
Yeah, because you're going to be buying peripherals. You're going to be buying extra things for RAM. There's actually on the character sheet, there's this thing up top that's like, okay, here's all your luxuries. There's an entire thing on the bottom that just says rig. And it's like, it's just like in Shadowrun, your rig is really important.
You can also, at a 1-to-1 ratio, spend wealth for stipend. So if you want to actually cover your weak points on the basics, you can spend your wealth to get additional stipend 1-for-1.
Yep.
How do you get wealth?
You rob someone. That's an option in the game. Actually, you can rob someone.
I mean, it is.
So that's how you get wealth in the real world.
One of the ways to get wealth in the actual game is at the end of a session, as part of the changes you make, you can choose to reduce your VAR, your in Ethereum sort of bonus, and you can get roll some dice to see if you can make some wealth off of that. So again, it's a system of trade-offs.
Yep.
that's basically it for Meatspace character creation. Meatspace character creation is the optional set of rules if you want to expand your role-playing game into the real world, beyond more of a like descriptive level. If you want to be able to roll stats and have dice and make other checks, then these rules are here to augment that. These rules are an additional set of trade-offs more than anything else. I don't think adding meat space makes your characters straight better.
Yeah.
I think it adds a series of trade-offs that can make a more fleshed out, sort of interestingly varied character, but it's a solid amount of rules complexity on top of the ethereal characters, and I think first-time players and DMs are perfectly fine if they want to skip it.
Yeah. I think even for more experienced players, if you want to have a game that's just like I want to hack things, I want to shoot fireballs out of a shotgun, I think that you can just skip Meat Space. Um, if you want to have a more in-depth game, where like your Ethereum actions have real-world consequences, or your real-world actions have Ethereum consequences, then yes, actually bring Meat Space into this. But it's almost like having two different games affecting each other, and it all depends on what you want to do.
Yeah. Every game system is about as interesting as the amount of time and effort a DM wants to put into it. Rules, with just the rules as presented, I think there's a reason Meat Space rules only cover one chapter in an entire book, otherwise dedicated to Ethereum rules. I kind of secretly suspect it's playing a campaign in Meat Space would be terrible. Like having an entire campaign focused just on Meat Space.
I could actually
Like,
see, I could see
go
a
play
game.
Shadowrun, my dudes.
Well, I could see a game where your group is already tight knit, and you've actually discovered, like, you hacked a pylon and you discovered something that's like super secret, and now they're coming at you at Meat Space, and you're trying to, like, okay, cool, well, I'm over here in Chicago, but you're over in DC. We need to meet up together, and we're going to try to do like the whole, like, I'm just a guy running around in the real world. Um, that would be interesting, but once again, unless you're actually focusing on that part of the game, you skip it.
Yeah, it is a set of tools for augmenting the storytelling of your actual adventure. I would not, like I said earlier when I mentioned using it as a cudgel. I would not focus, especially just starting out. If you do decide to use it, I wouldn't have real world consequences be coming up so often that they like sort of start taking more and more screen time away from, like, the Ethereum is the goal, it's the draw, it's where truly fascinating and adventurous and wonderful things can happen. And this real world with its advanced technology is another space you can explore and have ideas in. But I think continually you're going to want to come back to the Ethereum.
Yeah.
That's where the meat happens. So
right.
I think this is it for character creation. I think we've covered all the basics. If
You
we
should
think
have
of
a
more,
character.
we'll add them. But at this point, hopefully, we've answered the question of the original commentators who were wondering, how do you make a character in this game?
Yeah.
Since I think we spent about 2 hours talking about it.
Technically, if we break it down, it's like 4.
Well, there you go.
So,
Closing comments, gentlemen, on making characters or the Ethereum playing game for now?
I think we should actually do a game, I guess, maybe a one shot. With
that would
this.
be the natural conclusion.
So I'm just saying, my one class ends on October 17th, so I have more available free time to do said one shot when that happens.
Wait, Halloween is on a Saturday, which means
I heard rumor
Sunday
it
is open.
What does Halloween have to do with that?
Yeah.
We can have a Halloween one shot. DM.
On my screen, I'm not in that direction, so
Yeah,
I'm just going
that's
to
what
pretend that you
Dang
pointed
it.
at the
Well, I'm
ether.
recording it, so.
that way.
Oh, well. Hey, Jake,
No,
make a Halloween one
Also
shot.
not in that direction.
Make a Halloween one shot.
For me, it is.
We'll make characters and we'll do a Halloween one shot.
Yeah, okay.
so enthusiastic. All right.
I love one shots. There's no consequences. I'll kill you all.
I'm James.
Yay, I like character death. I'm Matt.
And I'm Jacob.
And Owen's being really quiet in the corner. So thank you for watching this series, and I can't wait to start the lore section. All right, game off.
Game off, everyone.
Bye.